Hello gang. So this video is a little outside the remit of what I normally cover on this channel, but since I've been doing reviews on YouTube, I've found myself paying a lot more attention to music journalism. And thanks to Oasis Reunion, there are two pieces of journalism that have come to my attention, both being differing levels of bad. In this video, I'm gonna take a look at both of them and explain why they're both wrong, but one is more wrong than the other. I recorded this video on a Twitch stream a week ago, and because I forgot to record it locally for the first 10 minutes or so, it starts off in a slightly lower quality than the rest of it. Hope that's okay. Enjoy. Here's the thing you need to know about me, gang. When YouTube recommends me a video, and it's a bad video, I take it very personally. This week just gone, I got recommended this video, the most offensive Oasis article I've ever read, and my response. It is a video by James Hargreaves Guitar. He claims to be working class, even though he has two surnames. He is a guitar teacher and an Oasis biographer. I personally don't really care that much about Oasis as a band. Never found any of their tracks particularly captivating, but equally I can't really rustle up the energy to hate them either. Recently it was announced that they are doing a series of reunion concerts. Because of that, there's been quite a lot of back and forths between people who like Oasis and people who don't. Probably the harshest salvo in that fight has been this article here. So this is by a journalist called Simon Price. This is under the opinion section of The Guardian. Let's just have a quick look at his recent history. Got this article from April here. Pop is awash with Nepo babies. Lennon and McCartney are just the latest, but why aren't they better at it? Nepo babies is a problem in stand-up comedy, in music, in many different art forms. So I think it's an issue that warrants an article. Madonna, 2 hours late to her own gig. Believe me, I've seen far worse. This is an article about artists turning up late for gigs. I think this is a worthwhile topic because, you know, a lot of people spend a lot of money on gigs and the person turns up 2 hours late and then you have to pay the babysitter overtime. People's behaviour at music gigs is getting worse. I have 3 rules to solve that. Another worthwhile piece. So that's everything that he's done in the 20s. But in the 10s, you notice he's got Northern Soul, 10 of the best. 10 of the best tracks by Pete Burns. Walk This Way, how Run DMC and Aerosmith changed pop. Some stuff about cult heroes, ranking every Prince album. It seems like in the 10s he was quite positive. He was celebrating artists, celebrating their oeuvres, and then something must have happened in between August 2017 and September 23 because all of his Guardian articles are now just complaining. This is the article. Stop the celebrations. Oasis are the most damaging pop cultural force in recent British history, which I think we'll all agree is quite a barbed headline. Now, I'm not going to read this article out on stream because the video that we're going to look at is actually going to do that for us. But I'll give you just a quick flavour of it. Dismal lyrics, plodding tunes and prehistoric political views. Why is everyone so happy that the Gallagher brothers are back? So you get the idea. This guy's saying Oasis music sucks, their political views suck, but everyone seems to be happy that they're still around doing music. He talks about Oasis being musically regressive, so, you know, they rewound the clocks by 30 years. That's basically a reference to the fact that a lot of the criticism they get is that they sound like the Beatles. 3 paragraphs here about stuff that Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher have said and done in public. Homophobic slurs. And then Noel's got some kind of like more right-wing expressions in his catalogue. He complained about Jay-Z headlining Glastonbury. He's described Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn as communists. Glastonbury's become too woke. He's called Prince Harry a woke snowflake. And so because of that, Price is making the argument that they appeal to a certain right-leaning demographic in the UK. A lot of people, when they slag off Oasis, they're accused of being middle class, but Simon Price talks about the fact that he's from a working class background and the fact that it's bad that Oasis are being regarded as the sole avatar for working class art. The author looks like Keith Flint ordered on Wish. You may say that. Given that Keith Flint is no longer with us, if you can get a suitable substitute on Wish, then I personally think you should. I know a lot of people online are clowning on how this guy looks. Personally, I think it's good that he's put the devil horns on his head himself so that thumbnail makers on YouTube don't have to. And then he closes the article by saying that the Gallagher's knuckle-dragging ideas on sexuality and politics arguably shouldn't matter, but the art at least needs to be good. Now, personally, I don't think this is a very good article. And this whole section here at the end is part of the reason why. If you're going to say the most damaging pop cultural force in recent history, and then you're going to use a lot of examples of dubious things they've said in the media, I think then saying, oh, but it'd be fine if the music was good, kind of shows that your priorities are a little in the wrong place. Like, I think even if an artist makes really good music, if they are ethically dubious, I think you should still be writing articles calling them out. I think there's quite a lot of hyperbole in this article as well. For me, this is rage bait, this piece, or it's kind of an antidote to all the relentless positivity about Oasis. A relief to read this after wall-to-wall adulation. I think this, for me, kind of summarises what joy, if any, I got out of this article, which isn't a huge amount, but it is genuinely refreshing to see people who don't think the reunion of Oasis is a good thing. So yeah, not a particularly good article, but as I say, it's an opinion piece. So for me, this fills a lot of the criteria that I expect from an opinion piece. It's saying, here's some things that they've said and done, here's why I don't like them, and as it's an opinion piece, you can agree or disagree. This response from James Hargreaves is very interesting to me. Let me just give you a little bit of context on who James Hargreaves before we get into it. So you got Oasis again. He does his own music as well. You got a bit about Queen, Led Zeppelin, Beatles. An interview with Rick Witter from Shed 7. Interview with Mark Morris from the Blue Tones. So you get the idea, right? He's a big Britpop fan, and he absolutely loves Oasis. So you can imagine that he's the sort of person who will read an article like this and not be too happy about it. Okay, here we go.
In the last few days, Oasis have announced that they are reforming after 15 years away. The country has exploded with enthusiasm, their upcoming tour is expected to be a record-breaking juggernaut, and the clamour for tickets is already bigger than it was recently for Paul McCartney. However, there have been a small, very vocal minority taking advantage of this opportunity to just lay into the band and their fans and make, in my opinion, some really, really offensive comments. So today, I want to share with you guys an article I read in The Guardian. And I just wanted to go through it with you because as one of the biggest Oasis historians and Oasis nerds out there, I happen to know that a massive amount of stuff in it was just wrong.
Okay, alright, so shots fired. It's not just the fact that Simon Price has a differing opinion, it's also the fact that he is incorrect. By the way, James Hargreaves Guitar has 80.9 thousand subscribers, so this is a pretty decently sized channel, just FYI. Like, this isn't some random I've just found here. Like, he's got a fan base.
On Wednesday the 28th of August 2024, so the day before yesterday, The Guardian published this. Stop the celebrations. Oasis are the most damaging pop cultural force in recent British history. Now, as I work through this article, I'm going to be supporting my side of the argument with a very useful resource from this website. YourLogicalFallacyIs.com. A logical fallacy is a flaw in reasoning. Logical fallacies are like tricks or illusions of thought, and they're often very sneakily used by politicians and the media to fool people. Don't be fooled. This website has been designed to help you identify and call out dodgy logic wherever it may raise its ugly, incoherent head.
First thing I want to say about this, as this is the main reason that I am doing this video. It's not just about, here's my opinion, here's why my opinion is better than Simon Price's. He's actually claiming that his arguments are grounded in logic here by using this website here, thou shalt not commit logical fallacies. Main thing I'll say about this description here, it says that logical fallacies are very sneakily used by politicians and the media to fool people. I would argue that everyone uses logical fallacies. A lot of it is unconscious. I think people don't really understand how to construct logical arguments a lot of the time. I don't think they're going to be trawling a site like this and thinking like, oh, there's an appeal to authority, I'm going to use that. Trying to be 100% logical all the time is not a virtue. Even Mr. Spock cannot keep that up. But when you are formulating arguments, like if it's in an article or if it's in a YouTube video or an interview or something like that, or especially debates, then these things are very useful to know, and you should make an effort to ensure that you don't commit all these issues. But see, the implication here is that because James Hargreaves Guitar is going to be calling out Simon Price for using logical fallacies, that Mr. Guitar's argument is actually going to be logically sound, and he is not going to commit any of these fallacies. Let's see how he gets on.
So then, let's get stuck into this article. It opens with this heartwarming question. Dismal lyrics, plodding tunes, and prehistoric political views. Why is everyone so happy that the Gallagher brothers are back? That's a really interesting headline, isn't it?
Not really.
Because basically what it's saying is, I don't like their music, I don't like their politics, so why doesn't everyone hate them? What a strange opening headline.
I mean, it's not really a strange headline, is it? It's clickbait. You deliberately use emotive language when you are doing a Guardian article or if you're doing a YouTube video. I mean, bear in mind, this is the guy who's called his video the most offensive Oasis article I've ever read. Like, if he just called this video responding to Simon Price's article about Oasis in the Guardian, it would not get anywhere near 66,000 views. The fact that he's put emotive language into the video title here, that's a deliberate choice. He knows this. Simon Price knows this. I'm probably going to be using something quite emotive to describe this one. I don't buy the idea that he thinks this is genuinely interesting and strange. I think he knows why it's been created this way.
The answer, of course, is because they bring joy and entertainment to millions of people worldwide. There's loads of dark, horrible stuff going on in the world on a daily basis, so a little more happiness in the world surely is a good thing, right?
Okay, so this is the first logical fallacy that our friend Mr. Guitar commits here. It's the bandwagon fallacy. This is also known as an ad populum. You appeal to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. So he's saying that because Oasis have provided joy and happiness to millions of people, that there are no possible, notable, negative things about them that are worth criticising. Anything that causes joy to a lot of people, there are going to be downsides to it. If you buy stuff from Amazon, Apple, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Primark, these are all like websites and shops that bring happiness to millions of people. But also there are downsides to them. You know, there's big ethical loopholes that they go through in order to provide happiness to people. In doing so, they're providing unhappiness to other groups of people. Now, I'm not saying that Oasis are anywhere near as bad as any of these companies, just to be clear. I'm just making the point that just because something provides happiness to a significant amount of people doesn't mean that it's unequivocally good. So he's already starting on shaky ground here, but I think what's happening is he's trying to do a paragraph by paragraph breakdown of this article, and he's kind of jumping the gun. This whole subheading here is just to get you to keep reading. It's like, oh, okay, so this is what the article's about. I wonder how he's going to justify these arguments. And he's already trying to jump in and break down the subheader rather than going into the meat of the article. So he's trying to make it seem like it is dishonest from the off.
So, 15 years of Punch and Judy bickering between Liam and Noel Gallagher has ended with the inevitable. Oasis reforming for a UK and Ireland tour. And a giant payday. Money talks, especially when Noel has a reported £20 million divorce settlement to cover.
Oof.
Now listen to this next bit. It's very revealing.
Okay.
Cue wild celebrations from the section of the British public who are still nostalgic for the simpler times of Euro 96 and the first Blair administration. Britpop's coming home. That's a very cleverly written sentence there, isn't it? The passionate Oasis fan community in the UK like simple times. Is that the barely covered implication that we're simpletons?
Not really. I think regardless of your intelligence level, there's a lot of people out there who yearn for a simpler time, you know? I wasn't really old enough to have any major stakes in all this stuff, but the world did feel like a simpler place back then. There was no social media. The internet was something that you could only use in highly expensive hour-long bursts at most. So, you know, we weren't bombarded with quite as much information and culture as we are now. And I don't think that is necessarily a sign of being an idiot or a simpleton if you have some yearning for those times again. I miss some aspects of the 90s. I will say that there's a lot I like about the time that we're in now as well. I like the fact that music is where it's at now and that there's a much more of a smorgasbord of stuff that you can access. And I like the fact that you can connect with people easier these days. People have similar interests and stuff like that to you. But at the same time, you know, the modern age is kind of exhausting, regardless of your intelligence level. There's just so much being thrown at you. Like, as humans, we're not really built to deal with the sheer amount of stimuli that we get on a daily basis these days. You know, I think we do kind of need downtime. So this is a conflation on Mr. Guitar's part here. He is taking the fact that the word simple was used in this part of the Price article, and he's saying that if you enjoyed that era, then he's calling you a simpleton. Now, the logical fallacy that he's using here isn't actually covered on this particular site. There is a name for it. It's called equivocation. Yeah, so the fallacy of equivocation occurs when a key term or phrase in an argument is used in an ambiguous way, with one meaning in one portion of the argument and another meaning in another portion of the argument. So this is what's happening on Hargreaves' part here, is that he is taking the fact that the word simple came up in Price's article and he is spinning it out into his own representation here. On the one hand, I think it's fine to infer that that might be what Price is suggesting here, but as you'll see, Hargreaves is about to build a lot of his argument around this point, so he's taking it as the only interpretation of how Price has expressed himself here, and that's a problem.
Football, Tony Blair, Britpop, all things that, generally speaking, the working class liked.
Okay, we're going to be using this website quite a lot. God, it's brilliant, isn't it? Composition/division. You assume that one part of something has to be applied to all or other parts of it, or that the whole must apply to its parts. So once again, let me just be clear here. He did use the word generally. Generally speaking, football, Tony Blair, Britpop, these are the things that the working class like. So he is obviously not saying that all of the working class like these things. But like with what I said previously about the simpleton thing, he is about to use this as the basis for his entire argument here. So he might as well have just said all working class people are like this. Also, it's not really a good look to complain that you're being called a simpleton and then respond by completely oversimplifying what this article is about.
In my opinion, we've started out with a logical fallacy called ad hominem, and it's defined on the excellent website I mentioned as attacking your opponent's character or personal traits in an attempt to undermine their argument.
To be fair, Price's article does have a lot of ad hominems in it, but I don't think I'd single this part out as being anywhere near the top of that.
And here, look at what we've had at the beginning of this article. Oasis's music is rubbish. I hate their politics. All their fans are simple and working class.
He didn't really say that they're all simple and working class. So that's something that you've inferred from that paragraph. But we're into this video for like, what, 3 minutes, and we've gone with 4 of these already. Objections been yeah, well, this is that's what I would take it as, Gergenik. So this is a straw man. There's going to be a lot of this. He misrepresented someone's argument to make it easier to attack. And spoiler alert, he is going to bring up straw men later as well. But I think it's much easier to criticise someone for using straw men arguments if you're not actually doing straw men yourself.
It's almost as if he's saying Oasis fans only come from this very specific section of society, when the reality is their reunion has been greeted with an outpouring of joy from many generations, many countries worldwide.
This is not really a criticism of Hargreaves specifically. I see this in a lot of videos, but where does this whole editing style come from? Where, like, you talk about the world and then you have to put up some stock footage of the world in order to show what the world looks like? Because I'm seeing this in loads of videos right now, and I need to know if I need to put this in my videos. You'll be watching something and someone talks about running, and then it'll cut to stock footage of some people running. Is this what they call retention editing?
I'm not among them, and here's why. I genuinely believe that Oasis are the most damaging pop cultural force in recent British history. It's easy to attack them for being musically regressive. After all, they didn't just stop the clocks, to quote the title of their 2006 Best Of, but they rewound them by 30 years. So there are two really sweeping statements in that paragraph, neither of which seem balanced, accurate or fair to me. Let's start with Oasis are the most damaging pop cultural force in recent British history. This article is laid out in a kind of mock essay style, so he starts off by saying, "This is what I am going to set out to prove. Oasis are the most damaging pop cultural force in recent British history." And now let's look at the arguments he makes to back up that claim.
Yeah.
Claim number one, they are musically regressive and rewound the musical standard in the UK by 30 years. Now, I've been a guitar teacher since I was 15. That's over a quarter of a century. I'm the son of two music teachers, one piano teacher and one woodwind teacher. My brother was a drum teacher. I hold 2 grade 8s, one in vocals, one in guitar, and I have a master's in music teaching. And
Right, so red flag here, gang, okay? Whenever someone outlines how many qualifications they have over the course of 18 seconds, that is usually a sign that their argument is going to be dog shit. And therefore, they're overcompensating by basically just saying, look, I'm really qualified in this area, so regardless of how well I make this argument, you should take my word for it. This is the appeal to authority. He said that because an authority thinks something, it must therefore be true. Now, remember that the claim here is that Oasis are musically regressive. I think you can argue there's some ambiguity there, but given that he said that they wound the clock back by 30 years, that suggests that the issue is that they largely copied the Beatles, which, as I say, is one of the main criticisms that people have of Oasis sound. It wasn't just the Beatles who inspired Oasis. This article is quite interesting here. Did Oasis really sound like the Beatles from Far Out magazine? Kind of goes into the comparisons between Oasis and the Beatles and breaks them down somewhat. But they point out that there are other older bands that they took inspiration from as well, like the Kinks, T-Rex, the Sex Pistols, which you can hear all of those quite easily, I think, in heyday era Oasis music. But see, here's the thing. Taking inspiration from artists doesn't automatically make you regressive as an artist. It depends on how you do it. New music doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes from taking old inspirations from stuff that's gone before and rearranging it into new ways. And I think part of the reason Oasis gets so much criticism when it comes to the Beatles comparisons is that they didn't make a huge amount of effort on that front. Because of that, this is all kind of very subjective territory, and him trying to throw out all these qualifications to say, right, my opinion holds some weight here, only makes sense if he's got an actual bona fide logical argument to prove that Oasis are doing something that transcends the music of the 60s that they're inspired by. Yeah? So, let's see how he handles this.
So, with some authority, I can say what Simon Price said here is, unfortunately, a comically inaccurate statement. Of course, there was some brilliant stuff in the 70s, for example, from Queen, Steely Dan and others. Fair enough.
We're talking about the 60s. I don't know why he's bringing up the 70s here, and I also don't know why the only two bands he thinks are worth mentioning are Queen and Steely Dan. Quite a lot of musical innovation in the 70s, you know? A lot of good bands. You Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, T-Rex, Stevie Wonder, David Bowie, Funkadelic, Sly and the Family Stone.
But literally, on paper, in a musical sense, the British pop music compositions that came out in the 60s and the 90s were light years ahead of anything we have today.
No one ever uses on paper in a positive manner. It's always with the caveat of in practice. I tend to use the phrase on paper when I'm talking about Propane Nightmares by Pendulum. For me, on paper, that's a fantastic song. There's so many good musical ideas in it, and yet in practice the vocals sound awful. It's got that wasp in a can synthesizer all the way through it. It's got that same basketball snare drum throughout. If we're being charitable here, he could mean that, like, if you look at it in terms of sheet music, and yes, I can see that being the case, but how well something notates as a piece of music is not necessarily any indication of how good it sounds as music. Like, there's so many other things like aesthetic preferences, what instruments you play on, what the mixing's like, what the production's like. There's all these different aspects that go into it. And also, remember that the charge here is about music being regressive and taking it back 30 years. And here, Hargreaves is mentioning the 60s and the 90s. So I kind of feel like he's either completely misunderstood what Price is saying, or he's deliberately misunderstood what Price is saying. In hindsight, I think what Hargreaves has done here is acted as if Price is attacking the 60s music that inspired Oasis, as well as Oasis themselves for being musically regressive, as in basic. This is despite the fact that Price, in his Guardian article about Northern Soul, praises numerous songs from the 60s, and he also just wrote an article about the Go Team's debut album, which had notable 60s influence in it, alongside many others. So it seems more likely that Price's problem with Oasis is the way in which they wear their 60s influences on their sleeve, rather than the actual technical complexity of the music, meaning that Hargreaves is once again equivocating and straw-manning.
And when it comes to Oasis specifically, you can just look at one song on What's the Story Morning Glory and see a whole plethora of advanced musical songwriting techniques. Take a look at She's Electric. That song incorporates the following techniques: extended chords, non-diatonic chords, genre-swapped chords, that's switching major and minor, subliminal key changes, and tonal ambiguity. That is literally the full list of highly advanced musical techniques employed by Brian Wilson on Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
Okay, so, you get the idea. I'm sure all the stuff that he said about the chord progressions is correct. I got no beef with any of that, but it sounds like the Beatles. And the thing is, with Britpop, if you look at some of the other artists in Britpop around that time, like, say, Blur or Pulp, for me, they were pushing a lot of those old ideas in more interesting directions. Like, Blur were working with electronics. Pulp had a lot of very densely layered things like Common People, for example. Whereas this does kind of sound like Beatles, but louder. And this article that I mentioned earlier about did Oasis really sound like the Beatles, they do mention She's Electric. They do make a mistake here. They say it's from Definitely Maybe, when, as Hargreaves said, it's actually from What's the Story Morning Glory. They point out that it's got very similar compositional elements to With a Little Help from My Friends. So I think you can be forgiven for feeling that the way that Oasis use those devices is not particularly imaginative, and that regardless of how complicated their chord structure is, it doesn't matter in practice, because the end result still sounds like just a heavier version of what we've had before, as opposed to other artists who put their influence together in a more imaginative way. This chart here, by the way, I did look this up on Google. It came up empty. I'm guessing this is like a guitar teacher chart of some sort. So he's suggesting that Oasis have earned their level 6 certificate. Great, but I think there is a limitation here. I think he's purely judging this from a guitar teacher perspective. So again, as I say, very simplistic to just boil it down to what chords Oasis are using here.
So let's keep categorising these arguments. Which logical fallacy have we encountered here? I believe this is the logical fallacy called the straw man.
Yeah, but that's what you've done. Taken the word regressive and you've used it to mean something that Price clearly didn't intend.
That's misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. Misrepresenting the reality of the quality of Oasis's music to make it easier to put down. So, claim number 1, false. Let's crack on with the article. The real problem is that they set social attitudes back even further. I'll never forget being present at the Q Awards in 2000 when Liam Gallagher repeatedly heckled Robbie Williams with queer and Kylie Minogue with lesbian as the assembled music business and media tittered nervously, reluctant to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. It's one of the ugliest scenes I've ever witnessed. This wasn't a one-off either. In 2016 on Twitter he called Russian football hooligans batty boys, and in 2018 used another homophobic slur, bum chums, against Noel, Johnny Marr and Paul Weller. One of the easiest ways to convince someone of a lie is actually to not tell an outright lie, but to tell a kind of half-truth. Include just a little bit of truth in the lie, and that will be enough to convince some people that the whole thing is valid.
Okay, I think this might be another self-report from James here.
And that is true about the Q Awards. Liam did do that stuff. And yeah, it doesn't look great.
Should we have a quick look at that? Because that is on YouTube. So yeah, unfortunately in watching this footage we do have to see the spectacle of Robbie Williams winning an award.
Okay, well, I just want to thank Rob for being the best writing partner that I could ever wish to work with. He's the nicest guy I've ever met. He's incredibly funny, and we're having the greatest time of our lives, and it's really cool. Thanks very much.
And I'm just going to keep me gob shut.
That look of horror on Liam Gallagher's face. So yeah, it's hard to hear. The next bit is a little clearer, but Liam is heckling during that part. Then next up we've got Kylie.
Aww. This goes to show, doesn't it? Who's soft lad?
Everyone, you goddess. Goddess, goddess. What was that? It's great, isn't it? We're being heckled. It's fantastic.
What did you say? I missed that.
Well, they are homophobic slurs, effectively, because it's not like he's yelling lesbian at Kylie Minogue from a place of respect. Using gay and lesbian as slurs back then was a lot more popular than it was now. I remember what the playground was like. It's kind of weird. I don't even know what basis he's got for shouting that at Kylie Minogue. If anyone knows what the context is behind that, then let me know. But that's very bizarre. So, not a good look.
Liam never has been Mr. Sensitivity, especially at award ceremonies when he was frequently smacked off his tits. So, that bit is true. It did happen.
Oh, actually, just a little note here. He did put around 8. This is not meant to imply any specific drug, just that he was frequently off his head in those times. So
yeah, it doesn't look good. But this is a cherry-picked moment.
Do you think he understands the irony of him saying the phrase, "This is a cherry-picked moment," right as he puts a cherry-picked moment up on screen?
And in my opinion, this has been presented without any balancing evidence to the contrary.
Thus far, his argument here is that Liam Gallagher has said numerous times that he's not homophobic, that he supports gay rights, and therefore there's no possible way that Liam could be in any way homophobic.
Intention of suggesting that Liam is a homophobe. Remember, someone always sounds guilty when the prosecution are the only ones to have spoken. You then get a bit of balance when you hear the defence.
It depends on the defence.
He's out with these. In the late 90s, Ocean Colour Scene frontman Simon Fowler was outed as gay in the press by British journalists in the Sun newspaper. Simon Fowler says, "When it happened, the first thing Liam Gallagher did was to come up and kiss me on the lips." Liam Gallagher has used really careless, coarse language many times. But when it came to throwing around careless language in this area, he did later apologise and said he would have no problem if his kids were gay.
Okay, so if you're going to make a case that Liam Gallagher is not homophobic in any meaningful, harmful way, then I'd say this bit here is the closest that we've got so
later
far.
apologised.
So thus far, he's got Gallagher saying he's not homophobic, which doesn't mean anything. A lot of people say they're one thing and then do another, right? Him planting a smacker on the lips of the ocean colour scene guy, that doesn't mean much to me.
We don't need to.
Yes, we do.
What?
Do your kids come to you for fatherly advice? They're asking Liam Gallagher. Not too much, a little bit. We talked a bit about drugs. One of them smokes a bit of weed. Nothing too heavy, but I'm there, man. Our chats are open about girls and things, and we've had that chat about if they're gay or anything. They know I'll love them, whatever. So this is a bit better. In terms of making a serious point that Liam Gallagher does not have any sincere issues with gay people, this comes a lot closer, as does the quotes here. Is there anything you want to tell me? Anything to do with your sexuality? You know I don't give a fuck about that. You are what you are. There's nothing that's out of bounds. These suggest that despite the use of slurs that Gallagher has made, fundamentally he does not have a problem with gay people. There is something to be said for outright saying that you agree with it, but also the way that you behave in relation to it. Like, so to give an example, my mum always used to say to me, I honestly don't care if you're gay. I honestly don't care if you're gay. She used to use that phrase a lot. In car journeys, just out of nowhere, she'd just go, I honestly don't care you're gay. And yet, over the course of my upbringing, she has confiscated a My Little Pony book that found its way into my book collection. She got rid of a pink shirt that I owned once without telling me. I once accidentally bought a purse thinking it was just a large wallet. It looked nice and roomy. I thought there'd be a lot of room to put my change in there. I kind of wanted to keep the purse, but my mum said, my son doesn't carry a purse. That's literally the phrase she used. And she went straight out of the house and came back within half an hour with like a proper man's wallet. You know, the kind that bursts at the seams the moment you put like 2 pence in there. You can say you're fine with something, but aspects of your behaviour can show that you're not entirely comfortable with it. Now, what I will say is that I don't think there's such a thing as being 0% homophobic or 100% homophobic. I think, like any kind of personal prejudices and whatnot, it's a sliding scale. Just because Gallagher has been saying this stuff doesn't mean that he shouldn't be criticised for the homophobic stuff. And yeah, it wasn't the one-off. Like, so, you know, this is in 2000, and then the tweets were in like 2016, 2018. There's another one that was mentioned from, I think it's in this article, the Adam and the Ants thing. Yeah. So not mentioned in the Simon Price one. This is from Neil Kulkarni. When someone talked to him about Adam Ant from Adam and the Ants, no, not into a geezer who wears makeup, especially fucking nutty ones. So, you know, it's a recurring thing. And the thing is, if you are a public figure, then there are going to be people who take your words seriously. Our man Mr. Guitar actually does acknowledge this himself when it comes to Oasis. This is a clip from another video that he did. This one is called Jarvis Cocker versus Michael Jackson, the Battle of the Brits 96.
Now, it's really hard to overstate the power and influence of those two major players I mentioned already in the 90s culture in the UK, that being Oasis and Chris Evans.
Okay, so the influence and power of Oasis. So he is saying that people take what Oasis say seriously, right? So if you've got someone like Liam Gallagher who is throwing homophobic slurs around unchallenged in public like this, then it can normalise the idea that other people can throw homophobic slurs around in public unchallenged. I don't believe that Liam is like homophobic with a capital H. I don't think Liam Gallagher has any actively harmful beliefs about gay people, but I think he does have some homophobic with a lowercase h problems.
No problem if his kids were gay. And yesterday, Cherry Ghost Official posted this tweet in response to this article and in support of Liam.
Again, cherry picking arguments, and he does it by picking an argument from someone who's actually got the word cherry in their name. Also, this is just the whole token thing, by the way. They will find the one person who is part of a minority to back up their arguments, about said minority. There's people who've made their entire career on that kind of shtick, you know, like Candace Owens, Jessie Lee Peterson, Blair White. They're the minority figure that people refer to when they want someone to back up an argument they have against that minority. And they say, well, you know, Candace Owens said this, and she's an actual black person. Or Blair White said this, and she's an actual trans person.
As a gay man and long-time collaborator and friend of Liam, I can honestly say I've been shown nothing but love, support and good vibes. I'm sure all the queer people in his social circle, and I've met many, would agree.
And for what it's worth, I don't necessarily doubt that statement either. I can't imagine Liam being the sort of person who never hangs out with queer people. But as I say, you know, it's the whole thing. Just because someone's been nice to me doesn't mean they've not been unpleasant to other people.
So if you assess this in a calm, analytical way, it seems fairly obvious that the reality here is just that Liam is someone who is incredibly careless with his language, but you find out who someone really is.
Well, that was another, you saw that little screenshot there, so a second testimony from a gay person.
Much more by their actions. And this logical fallacy is something called the Texas sharpshooter, and it's defined this way. Cherry picking.
Yeah, I didn't actually know this was called the Texas sharpshooter beforehand. I've always just known this as cherry picking. I think that's a far catchier term for this particular logical fallacy. But yeah, it's picking specific bits of data to suit your argument. And just like with the other logical fallacies he's done so far, this is one that can easily be applied to himself.
Data clusters to suit an argument, or finding a pattern to fit a presumption. Claim 2. That implication that maybe Liam is a homophobe is also 100% false.
100%. Not 99%. Not 98%. Not 97%. You know, suggesting that Liam is 100% homophobic, I'd say that's a flawed argument. But saying he's 100% not a homophobe? God, no.
Noel, too, has repeatedly expressed prehistoric views, complaining about a hip-hop artist, Jay-Z, headlining Glastonbury in 2008, though he'd softened his stance by the time Stormzy headlined in 2000.
Okay, so this is actually a weak argument on Price's part if we take this just in the context here. Price does elaborate on this particular section, so this isn't just an isolated instance. He's using this as part of a wider tapestry. But if we look at this in and of itself, what he's saying is that Noel complained about Jay-Z, a hip-hop artist, and then he's changed his mind on it by 2019 because he's not saying the same things about Stormzy. So this is an example of someone changing their stance, and as such, I don't think this really helps Price's argument.
So let's take a look at what Noel Gallagher actually said about Jay-Z. Noel Gallagher, the notoriously outspoken Oasis guitarist, criticised the organisers of the Glastonbury Festival yesterday for featuring the American rapper Jay-Z as a headlining act, declaring hip-hop wrong for the annual event. Saying that the festival was built on a tradition of guitar music, Gallagher said that the scheduled appearance of a rap star on the central pyramid stage could be the reason why tickets for the summer festival had not yet sold out. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, he said. If you start to break it, then people aren't gonna go. I'm sorry, but Jay-Z? No chance. Gallagher added, Glastonbury has a tradition of guitar music, and even when they throw the odd curveball in on a Sunday night, you go, Kylie Minogue? I don't know about it, but I'm not having hip-hop at Glastonbury. It's wrong. So here's a little bit of context to that. Glastonbury did used to be a place that really championed guitar bands, and particularly homegrown British ones. But sadly, as founder Michael Eavis stepped back from the helm, that original commitment and sense that this was a home festival for British indie bands began to get eroded.
Okay, a lot of problems with this section. It's built on the assumption that Glastonbury was set up as a festival for homegrown British guitar bands. Let's have a look at this, shall we? So, first ever Glastonbury Festival was in 1970, right? It's not actually called Glastonbury Festival at this point. It's called the Pilton Pop, Folk and Blues Festival. Just take that in for a moment. Pop, folk and blues. Pop, as we all know, means popular music. Pop has quite a wide remit. It shifts over time. Different things become popular and then things also become less popular. So things go in and out of fashion. In 1970, guitar bands were very much the norm in popular music. If we look at pop music around the time of 2008, hip-hop counted as pop music. Popular music and pop music are not exactly the same thing. Popular music is a much broader term which includes everything that isn't classical or folk. The terms popular music and pop music are often used interchangeably, although the former more accurately describes all music that is popular and includes many disparate styles. Although much of the music that appears on record charts is considered to be pop music, the genre is distinguished from chart music. Okay, I take your point on that one. Pop music, you could say, from this description, it would be music that is deliberately designed to be popular, whereas popular music tends to include stuff that is more ends up popular by accident as well. Whichever way you slice it on this one, whether we're talking about pop music or popular music, this festival was originally built around the notion of music that was designed to be popular. The point is that in terms of Glastonbury's starting point, what Hargreaves is saying about it here is kind of misleading. Then in 1981 onwards, it was changed to Glastonbury Festival. And this is when Michael Eavis, who Hargreaves mentions, took the helm of running the event. So we look at this, we've got a smorgasbord of acts here. You've got Aswad, who are a reggae band. Gong, some prog rock there. Hawkwind, kind of like psychedelic. John Cooper Clarke, of course, who's a spoken word artist. New Order, who do use guitars, but I think they've been more credited with their influence on synth pop overall. These are mostly British bands we've got here. So if we look at 1982's lineup here, we have got Jackson Browne, who's American. We've got Richie Havens, who's American. Talisman, who are a Swedish band. Then if we go into 1983, we've got Curtis Mayfield, who's American. Dennis Brown is Jamaican. You've got Tom Paxton. Jean-Philippe Riquiel, who is French. Dr. John is an American. Melanie is an American. This is like, what, we're only, what is it, 1, 2, 3, we're only 6 Glastonburys in so far in 1983, and already the idea that this is specifically meant to be a British artist festival is kind of being undermined. I doubt that Glastonbury was necessarily specifically set up to be for British artists only, or to prioritise British artists. It's the fact that it's set up in Britain. So, of course, it's going to prioritise British artists because we know they're the ones who can actually turn up. And if you're starting a festival from scratch, as he did back in 1970, on a small-scale thing like that, you're not going to want to invite huge headliners over from across the pond, because that's not going to be practical. You don't have the budget to pay artists like that for that service. So you are going to start with smaller local artists. And over the years, if your festival gets more and more popular, you'll build things up like that. Now, if we look at like 1986, for example, if we look at like just the main stage and the artists who are on it, we've got Howard Hughes and the Western Approaches, American band. Black Uhuru and the Wailers, Jamaican band. Loudon Wainwright III, it's American. Robert Cray Band, that's an American band. And Gil Scott-Heron. Not only is Gil Scott-Heron American, Gil Scott-Heron is a spoken word artist who is widely considered to be a big influence on hip-hop. So as early as 1986, we are getting, if not full-blown hip-hop, then at least proto-hip-hop. If we skip to 1990, we've got De La Soul. It doesn't state on this poster which stage they're on, but they're a prominent name on this poster. In 1992, we start seeing rave make its way onto the stage with the Shaman, and also the Orb. 1993, if we look at that lineup, we have got look, on the main stage, the Pyramid stage on Sunday, we've got PM Dawn, who are a hip-hop act. Also on the Enemy stage, we've got Diggable Planets, who are a hip-hop act. And then 1995, first year that Oasis were on the main stage, you also had Spearhead performing on the main stage. Those are also a hip-hop band. So this idea that hip-hop doesn't belong at Glastonbury is pretty flawed. The idea that it's purely a festival for homegrown guitar music, as you see, it's been challenged numerous times in the early years of the festival into the 90s. And additionally, can I just point you to the title of the Glastonbury Festival at this point here? You notice it's called Glastonbury Festival of Contemporary Performing Arts. This is a shift that occurred in 1990, as you can see. Festival took the name of the Glastonbury Festival of Contemporary Performing Arts for the first time to reflect the diversity of attractions within the festival. Not only was Glastonbury not set up as a festival for prioritisation of homegrown British guitar music. It also has moved away from the idea that it's purely a festival about music. It's a performing arts festival now. And performing arts is pretty broad, and a lot of different genres fit under music. Now, just by way of comparison here, remember that he said that there was a concern that this kind of music was being pushed out. Let's look at the 2008 lineup. This is the year that Jay-Z headlined. The idea is that if Jay-Z is headlining at Glastonbury, then all the British guitar bands are being sidelined. Let's have a look at the lineup for the Pyramid Stage in 2008. So, Friday, we've got Kings of Leon, the Fratellis, Editors, Gossip, The Feeling, Katie Tunstall, Get Cape, Wear Cape, Fly, The Subways, Kate Nash. So, with the possible exception of Kate Nash, I'd say pretty much every artist on the Pyramid Stage on Friday is a guitar act. Kings of Leon and Gossip are American, but the rest of them are British bands. Saturday, so you got Jay-Z headlining. Amy Winehouse, not a guitar band per se, but I mean, she worked with live instruments. Manu Chao is French-Spanish. Raconteurs are American, but they're a guitar band, you know. James Blunt is on the main stage on Saturday. Crowded House, British guitar act. C6 Steve, American. Martha Wainwright, American. Shakin' Stevens is British. So it's a more of a mixed bag on the Saturday, but I don't feel the sense that there's no room for them at the moment, you know. And then on the Sunday, you've got the Verve, obviously, British guitar band. Leonard Cohen's Canadian. Goldfrapp, more of a British synth pop act at the time. This might have been when they switched over into doing more rocky, folky stuff, actually. So maybe an appropriate booking based on Hargreaves' criteria. Neil Diamond, American. John Mayer, American, I think. Brian Jonestown, Massacre, American. You got Gilbert O'Sullivan though, and you got Martina Topley Bird. So those are both British acts. Jay-Z definitely sticks out a bit in this lineup, but equally you could say that about De La Soul or Spearhead in the previous lineups that we've looked at, and that like hip hop is not a majority by any stretch. But they've clearly been welcome for a long time at this festival. And also, if we actually look at the other stage, plenty of guitar bands here to choose from. Again, not all of them are British, but like there's no real sense that British guitar music is being displaced by hip-hop. Now, fast forward to the most recent festival. Let's have a quick look at what we had this year. So the headliners had Dua Lipa on Friday, Coldplay on Saturday, and SZA on Sunday. Now, I know SZA was a particularly controversial pick, mainly because a lot of people didn't know who she was, and she had sound problems during her set. At the same time, though, I mean, SZA is still a pretty notable artist. You know, she's collaborated with Drake, so certainly for a younger audience, I think they're more likely to know who SZA is than perhaps the demographic who went to Glastonbury in the 90s and the noughties. Things move on. And this is the point that I want to make with this lineup here. So, you know, you got PJ Harvey, you got Paul Heaton, Squeeze, all artists who've been around for a while. Keen, C6D's back again as well, you know. If you are into that 90s Britpop sound or just rock in general, at least on the main stage there's not a huge amount of it, but there's also loads of stages at this point. You know, we look at the other stage, you got Idols, you got Bombay Bicycle Club, got Block Party, you got Last Dinner Party, you know, all the parties. Two-Door Cinema Club, Avril Lavigne, James, there's the Zootons. That kind of music is still being represented here. It's just not as popular as it once was. Music does shift, trends shift, things change. 1994-5 was also an era for magazines like Kerrang were criticised for talking about Prodigy and other bands. Pitch Shifter brought more and more sequencer work into their sounds. Guitar band purists complained about being pushed out then too. Yeah, Noel Gallagher worked with the Chemical Brothers. He's been the vocalist on their songs at least twice. The Chemical Brothers' roots in their sound is hip-hop. If you listen to like Exit Planet Dust, a lot of it is that kind of hip-hop cut-up stuff that people like Meat Beat Manifesto used to do, but it's just with a slightly more rock edge to it. Noel Gallagher has been actively supporting the cause of hip-hop in some form long before this Jay-Z thing, so his comments about Jay-Z are very odd Let me just go back a moment.
As founder Michael Eavis stepped back from the helm, that original commitment and sense that this was a home festival for British indie bands began to get...
Eavis said he only agreed to his daughter's pleas to bring Jay-Z to the farm because his preferred act, Radiohead, fell through. It was either that or cancel the show, he said. I knew she had sensible ideas, so I had to go with that. It was the last throw of the dice for me. We either throw the dice or abandon the festival. Let's have a look at this. So, it fell to Eavis to call that rapper's agent. I had to ask, how do you pronounce it? Is it Jace? Is it JC? Eavis said he stood firm when Jay-Z's agent offered him Kanye West instead. In the end, Jay-Z triumphed, delivering a landmark performance credited with turning around the festival's fortunes. The slowness of the ticket sales or whatever, dunno, it's hard to tell. I think there's more to it, and as I say, I don't think that the way that Noel Gallagher describes his attitude towards no hip-hop on stage is particularly coherent.
That original commitment and sense that this was a home festival for British indie bands began to get eroded.
Yeah, which it wasn't.
And slowly but surely, fans of British guitar music, like myself, began to switch off and tune out. As Michael Eavis's influence waned, and as Glastonbury began to sort of change its focus, many British bands felt a little bit stabbed in the back, and all of
This animation looks a little bit like something that PragerU would put in one of their videos, which is kind of unfortunate given where this section is going.
a sudden, a little bit homeless, as if the biggest rock and roll festival in the country had now disowned them. And I think Noel, as a massive champion of homegrown working class British guitar music, could see this and was disappointed.
Yeah, but he also worked with the Chemical Brothers, dude.
And you know what? That's fair enough. Rolling Loud is the biggest hip-hop festival in the world. Don't you think hip-hop diehards would feel a little bit betrayed and a bit disowned by their festival if all of a sudden Oasis were the headliners? Of course they would.
Yeah, but well, the difference there is that, like, if you actually look up Rolling Loud's website, even before you get into the website, it says the largest hip-hop festival in the world. So they have, from their inception, explicitly set up what they're about. Glastonbury has never said they are exclusively a festival for British guitar music. So, no, that is a false comparison.
And they would be right to feel that way. And so, the same applies in reverse.
No.
Here Noel is saying he's not into hip-hop and wants the British guitar music scene to be prioritised and protected.
But I mean, as we've seen in that 2008 lineup, it was. Jay-Z was a kind of outlier, and an outlier who paid off. But most of the other artists that you saw on the Pyramid stage there were guitar bands, and a lot of them were from the UK. How much of a prioritisation of guitar music is good enough for you?
And he is 100% right. The British guitar scene should be prioritised somewhere. If not here, where?
Make your own festival, dude. Like, you know, there's plenty of festivals around that still cater to that shit, surely. And also, guitar music is coming back. Slowly, it's coming back. And if this guy even paid attention to what was going on in the music world, he'd know this. But he's not even trying to theorise why.
It should have somewhere that feels like home, because it's precious and it is under threat. And it's worth pointing out that disliking any musical style has nothing to do with the content of your character. I don't like hip-hop at all, but I've got no problem with any hip-hop artist. I hate country and western as well. So what? It's just a musical preference.
It depends on why you don't like hip-hop. I think there are like compositional and structural reasons why people might dislike hip-hop, you know, like because vocally it's more about rhythm and lyrical dexterity than it is about melody and tune. Some people like singing as opposed to rapping. It's also largely an electronic form of music, so it's mainly going to be about samples rather than live played elements. There are exceptions, of course. And, you know, there are people who dislike hip-hop for those reasons, and then there are people who dislike hip-hop for more, shall we say, subconscious reasons. Also, it's worth noting that hip-hop is a pretty broad genre with a wide-ranging influence. It's cross-pollinated in rock music in numerous forms over the years, like indie dance, big beat, new metal. So to state that he doesn't like the genre at all in such an emphatic way does have something of a sweeping knee-jerk quality to it. The content of your character. You see, this is the thing. This guy, you'll notice he's not mentioned anything about race. He is trying to keep that out of the conversation, and yet it's just kind of lingering, isn't it? It's just a sense that, like, he doesn't want to step on that third rail. You don't accidentally say the content of your character like that. Yeah. Also, by the way, the point he made about country music, that is a huge cop-out argument that people make in the UK all the time about music. You ask someone in an office what kind of music they like, they'll be like, oh, I like a bit of everything, you know, but except country. It's like, yeah, it's easy to say that you don't like country in the UK because we don't have to deal with it. It's not a musical genre that really comes up very often. But you know, that is slightly changing at the moment because Beyonce released Cowboy Carter this year, which was her country album, and my partner pointed out that there are just little bits of country music creeping into the UK charts, so we might be on the cusp of a country revolution in pop music. God forbid.
The representation of British guitar bands was bang on. Just look at how he's been vindicated over time. They've all been forgotten and abandoned by the mainstream media for years now. When was the...
So is it the mainstream media's fault that people haven't been into guitar music for all these years? Or what? What's going on?
last time a British guitar band broke through to the mainstream with the support of Glastonbury, BBC and the NME? It's been ages. It's been far too long. Noel's concern was well founded, and in my opinion, history has shown that to be true.
Okay. So, when you start talking about guitar music being displaced, and then you flash up a photo of Noel Gallagher and Mick Jagger with Goldie and Stormzy, this is the musical equivalent of Great Replacement theory. And I don't know whether he intended it to come across that way or not. What, so Noel's hanging around with Stormzy, modern grime hip-hop artist, and Goldie, drum and bass artist, and he's putting this up as if this is a bad thing. Bear in mind, by the way, that this all revolves around the fact that he's arguing against the implied notion from Simon Price that Noel is racist for not wanting Jay-Z to headline Glastonbury, for not wanting hip-hop to be a prominent part of Glastonbury. To be fair, Price is quite evasive about race in that situation either. He doesn't say why he thinks it's bad that Noel Gallagher didn't want Jay-Z to headline Glastonbury. He just said it was prehistoric. But obviously the implication there is that it's coming from some racial biases. In trying to clap against Simon Price's argument here that it's not racist to dislike hip-hop, he is using the kind of rhetoric that you would get from far-right channels on YouTube. The way that he's talking about guitar music as if it's an indigenous class and he's protecting, like, this is like Lauren Southern or Nick Fuentes shit. I've looked at his channel. He's got a real blind spot regarding race, this James Hargreaves guy. I looked up for videos of like Skunk Anansi. He didn't have any. Looked up I think Echo Belly, like nothing about them. Not even anything about Babylon Zoo. What's wrong with this guy? One other thing, one other case. So there was another video I watched. It was the Pulp one. So it's the same one, the Pulp Michael Jackson one. He mentioned that
Jarvis, Tricky and Mushroom from Massive Attack got up and tried to get on stage. Only Jarvis made it though. Tricky and Mushroom were stopped by security.
later on in the same video, James Hargreaves then says that Jarvis Cocker
is still well remembered for being the only person in the whole of the British music record industry at that time who was willing to take a stand against a multi-millionaire American standing on stage telling the whole country that he was their messiah.
The lack of awareness in this guy's part is outstanding. Anyway, let's carry on.
Was well founded, and in my opinion, history has shown that to be true. Claim number 3, that Noel is prehistoric for disliking hip-hop. False.
You haven't proved anything. A little note here, he says Noel's music taste is prehistoric. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that his views are prehistoric, not his music tastes. I mean, let's not forget, he did say earlier,
disliking any musical style has nothing to do with the content of your character.
So notice how he slipped that in there as his summary. It's another straw man argument.
Let's carry on with the article, but I just want to give you a heads up. It gets really, really offensive at this point.
I mean, we've already crossed that boundary, my friend.
Noel has expressed prehistoric views describing the then Labour leader Ed Miliband as a fucking communist in 2015, and later Jeremy Corbyn in similar terms. In 2021, he appeared on the front page of The Sun calling Prince Harry an effing woke snowflake, and in 2024 complained about Glastonbury becoming too woke. Hint, when anyone uses the word woke as an insult, they are immediately emblazoning another word across their own forehead, which also begins with a W. It's no coincidence that Oasis are the band of choice for Flag-shaggers and Reform voters. It's remarkable how often their fans have the butcher's apron on their Twitter bios, just as Noel had it painted on his guitar. So here we have a continuation of what we saw right at the beginning. He seems to be suggesting that anyone who doesn't like Ed Miliband or Jeremy Corbyn has a prehistoric view.
No, it's not about not liking Ed Miliband or Jeremy Corbyn. It's about the fact that he called them communists. It's one thing to say that you don't like Ed Miliband as a person or Jeremy Corbyn as a person. It's another thing to misrepresent their political leanings in doing so by suggesting they're somehow radical. I mean, yeah, Price even acknowledges in the article, he said, yes, Ed Miliband, pointing out how ridiculous it is to suggest that Ed Miliband's a communist. Corbyn, I get why people say that. I think if you look at his policies and whatnot, he actually wasn't a communist. It is kind of weird that on the one hand, Hargreaves is fine for Noel to mischaracterise Miliband and Corbyn's political views, and on the other hand, he gets upset at the idea that his favourite band might be liked by extremists.
He's basically
So yeah, it's another straw man.
saying that anyone who feels that way is a caveman. And when you look at it, this whole paragraph is littered with emotional trigger words designed to get people feeling angry.
Yeah, it's an opinion piece.
Which, of course, is never a helpful ingredient when you're trying to stay calm, fair, and rational. So far, we've had the comparison of people who like Oasis to simplistic football fans, and the suggestion that anyone who has political views like Noel Gallagher must be a caveman. And he also goes on to say that anyone who doesn't like woke culture is a wanker.
I'd like to know what this guy thinks woke culture actually is, by the way, because he has just dropped it there, unquestioningly, as being a thing.
We've not had any facts or any real backup at all so far. We've just had insults.
So I like the stock footage of the kid crying.
This is really, really nasty, intolerant stuff. I would never talk this way about anyone on the left or the right. It's bang out of order. And frankly, just openly hateful to anyone with different views.
Okay, so I can't verify this because he's not talking much about his politics, but this guy strikes me as the kind of person who thinks that political views are just like one of those preferences that people have, like whether you like tea or coffee. Your political views have an effect on the wider world. Who you vote for, the kind of rhetoric that you spread about politics and politicians and people's political views and stuff like that, that does actually have an effect on the wider world around you. That does matter. Also, there's the paradox of tolerance, you know, the Karl Popper thing. If you tolerate too much intolerance, then the tolerant ones will be vanquished. Price is clearly coming at it from the perspective that hard right leaning thought processes and that need to be stamped out, whereas this guy is just going to say it doesn't matter what you believe in.
And look at that last sentence. It's no coincidence that Oasis are the band of choice for Flag-shaggers and Reform voters. It's remarkable how often their fans have the butcher's apron on their Twitter bios, just as Noel had it painted on his guitar. So at this point we have moved beyond just a kind of emotional vent into pretty much full-on lies. This is so opposed to reality, it's brain melting. Oasis leaned left.
Yeah, so did the Pepe the Frog guy. Not all Oasis fans are racist, but all racists are Oasis fans. That's the kind of argument that Price is making. And I don't know enough about Reform voters to know if they all like Oasis, so I can't verify that. But yeah, he's working backwards. I late to the stream and know nothing about this man but his hair buff. Oh, it's fine. You know, he just looks like a kind of cuddly Craig Cash figure. I've got no problems with his look. You know, when this goes on YouTube, the one thing that people are going to complain about with this is my hair.
They literally helped Tony Blair get elected. And this guy was there at the time and knows it.
Yeah, but that was 1997 that happened, remember? I looked this article up about Noel Gallagher's political views because God forbid this guy does any research. England is shit because of Brexit, so let's rejoin the EU. In 2017, he told the Noisy Music channel that the UK should move on, and those complaining about the EU referendum results should fucking get over it. And then in 2023, Gallagher said, "What has happened to this country? I have no idea." Well, I have an idea. Brexit happened. A lot of people fell under some kind of mass hypnosis. But yeah, it's shit England now, and it was going downhill for a bit, but actually fuck all works. Donald Trump is scary, but also fucking hilarious. This is another thing he changed his tune on before the election. He said, "I find Donald Trump fucking hilarious. If it's a toss-up between Hillary Clinton and Trump, American politics is in the worst fucking place than ours." And then after the election, he said, "His views on the environment are pretty fucking scary, and that will affect my children." I don't think Noel Gallagher particularly thinks that much about politics. Also bear in mind, yes, he didn't like Jeremy Corbyn or Ed Miliband, so he seems to flip back and forth. But yeah, again, I feel left wing and right wing, like the homophobia stuff, it's not black and white. It's a sliding scale.
Simon Price is not a member of the Oasis UK fan community. I am, and I have been since I was a kid. And so I know of what I speak, and we are overwhelmingly left of centre, calling Oasis the band of choice.
I'm on dodgy ground criticising him for this because I know I've made some anecdotal stuff throughout this stream as well. I think it's really difficult to not do this, but he is using an anecdote here as the crux of his argument. He's using a personal experience or an isolated example instead of a sound argument or compelling evidence. A fan community is a really difficult thing to define unless you've got somewhere online like a Reddit board or a Discord server or something like that. And also, he's not even defining how things are left-wing beyond Tony Blair is left-wing. That's his only stance so far on politics, is that Tony Blair is left-wing.
For Flag-shaggers and Reform voters is like saying all Primal Scream fans are BNP members. It's just bollocks.
You leave Primal Scream fans out of this.
And the use of the Union Jack in the Britpop movement was about reclaiming it. It was never anything to do with fascism or hate, and it still isn't.
Okay, so to be fair, I don't think Noel used the Union flag in a hateful manner when he put it on his guitar. But again, there are plenty of people who do. It's the whole, once again, not everyone who flies the Union flag is racist, but all racists fly the Union flag. I guess there's also a right-wing contingency in the Oasis fan community, and there's a load of reasons why this would do so. Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing. Like, so this is, it's anecdotal evidence.
It was always about rekindling pride in British music and British culture. It was about turning away from the dark associations of the past and looking forward to something hopeful and new. So what the fuck are you on about?
Oh, do you remember when he was saying he was going to stay calm, fair and rational? Oh, there's the F-bomb. Also, can I just point out, this is not healthy, by the way, what he's doing, ticking things off, logical fallacy-wise, but because he's using that, I feel I can help myself, and this is personal incredulity. He found something difficult to understand or unaware of how it works, so he's made it out like it's probably not true. Is there a bingo card? Yeah, we should do a bingo card at the end of this. I'm intrigued to see how many of these we get.
Thus far, Simon Price has said that we in the Oasis fan community are simplistic, far-right, caveman flag-shaggers. I am none of those things, nor do I know any Oasis fans who are. The logical fallacy we have encountered here is called the appeal to emotion, manipulating an emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument.
Okay, to be fair, appeal to emotion is very much something that you could apply to Simon Price's article, but the fact that he's waited until now to use this as his argument suggests that he really has lost the plot.
Claim number 4. Oasis are the band of the far right. False.
He didn't prove that.
Oasis and the Oasis fan community have always leaned left of centre, and still do to this day. Let's carry on. Oasis apologists in the media will always brush over this stuff, calling Noel a legend who gives good copy, and chuckling at Liam's banter, arguing that Oasis are the people's band, or the voice of a generation, and that the Gallaghers are expressing the views of the masses, in the vernacular of the masses. When you dare to challenge that, you're invariably accused of snobbery against a band who have been dubiously anointed as the sole authentic musical mouthpiece of the proletariat.
This is quite a dense paragraph. From what I can tell, I think the argument that is being made in this paragraph here, the problem is with the media in terms of how they've encouraged Oasis behaviour, and also the way that they have made Oasis synonymous with working class. What's the working class like? Oh, just look at Oasis. So it's kind of like making a sweeping judgment about the entire working class of the UK just by looking at one band and their behaviour.
So here we have the suggestion that Liam and Noel's edgy comments in the media are actually all sincere and are not just banter.
Okay. I don't think that's the argument that Price is making here, but whatever, let's go with it.
But what does that actually mean? The problem here is Simon Price is criticising a culture of which he is not a part.
Right.
In the next 2 paragraphs.
Right, okay. This is hugely important. This is the only paragraph I'm going to read out in full. So, following the one that we just read. But the Gallaghers can't outflank me on class. At the risk of writing a Glamorgan version of the Four Yorkshiremen sketch, the basic facts of my upbringing are these. Single-parent family, permanently skint, never had a car, never had a telephone, the TV kept getting repossessed, and I lived in 7 different flats and houses before I left home. I've seen Leafy Burnage and the house Liam and Noel grew up in, and we never lived anywhere as big as that. Nor can they outflank me on age. I'm slightly younger than Noel, and guitarist Paul Bonehead Arthurs, that's his official nickname by the way, a bit older than Liam and the others. I'm from their class and their generation, but the inconvenient truth is that no class is a homogeneous mass, and nor is any generation. This is very, very important to the article. A lot of slagging off Oasis is accused of being classist. This is a Guardian article as well, which is generally, Guardian is regarded as being a middle-class rag. So it is important that Price has mentioned his background here, because if you're taking this in good faith, you can't dismiss Price's concerns here as being classist. What he's saying is that, considering they are a band that are regularly associated with being working class, to the point where they're often held up as the sole example of working class, that it's disappointing that they are used to represent the class that he's from. And I'm just going to read out the next paragraph as well, because this comes up in a moment. Oasis have been presented as the true voice of the council estates from the very start of their career, but what of their less stereotypical but equally working class 1990s contemporaries? Don't they count? No band was more aware of class politics than Sheffield's Pulp, for example. But Pulp were arty and sang about outsiderdom and dressed like Oxfam dandies instead of Arndale Centre townies. So they're considered somehow less real than their Mancunian peers. Meanwhile, the Manic Street Preachers are as working class as they come, but refuse to conform to lads cliches, played with androgyny and homoeroticism, and wore their state education on their leopard print sleeves. So effectively he's saying that in Britpop there were other bands who were around who represented different aspects of being working class in the 90s, and yet they are not getting as much recognition for that as Oasis are. Price is making the point that class is complex. It's more complicated. Now let's see how James Hargreaves handles this.
Criticising a culture of which he is not a part. In the next 2 paragraphs, he points out he was of the same generation and the same class as Oasis and most Oasis fans. But he also...
Right, so that paragraph there, do you notice he put that on the screen for 8 seconds? That is the first and last time you are going to see that paragraph in this video. You know how he's been going through, like with a fine-tooth comb, all these other paragraphs that have been in the article so far? Yeah, he's not going to cover this. And let's just see quickly how he summarises that and the following paragraph.
Of which he is not a part. In the next 2 paragraphs, he points out he was of the same generation and the same class as Oasis and most Oasis fans.
Right, yeah, so same generation and same class. So he is acknowledging that part of the argument.
But he also points out that he wasn't quite part of the same culture.
Wasn't quite part of the same culture. That's a strange way of hand-waving this. Here it depends on really on how you're defining culture. Let's see where he goes with it.
I was, however, and as a northern lad who grew up poor, working class in the 90s, massive Britpop fan, I grew up knowing a few of the unwritten...
So, I don't know if you all are familiar with a fallacy called the no true Scotsman. He made what could be called an appeal to purity as a way to dismiss relevant criticisms of flaws of your argument. So, Price is trying to talk about how working class culture is not a homogeneous blob. There is diversity in interests and variations within that culture. And in doing so, Hargreaves has decided that means, oh, he's not part of the same culture. It's not proper working class, you know, it's not true working class. Because that is the implication here, isn't it? I don't know how else you could possibly read that.
Rules, and therefore, like many of the working class do, can interpret Liam and Noel's behaviour through that filter.
Also, this rules bit here, again, God, the bingo card is going to be overflowing at this point. By using the phrase rules, he's kind of doing, it's sort of an appeal to tradition, appeal to nature, genetic fallacy. It's kind of somewhere between all these things. It's saying that this is the way it's always been. This is the way it is, so there's no reason you should criticise that. This is just how it is.
And one of the most important things to understand is this. When lads in the UK, particularly working class lads, are close, good friends, one of the biggest things they do is insult each other. It's all for comedic effect, and it's all done knowing, or at least hoping, that it won't be taken too seriously.
Okay, so let me just put my class credentials on the table, seeing as how we're having a class off, as it were. I can't compete on the working class front on this one. I was born into a working class family. My dad and my mother were both military. My dad died in the first Gulf War as part of being in the military, and after that, things got a little bit more middle class. That's my main recollection. The houses that I lived in growing up were kind of nicer than the ones that I remember when I was a kid. But went to comprehensive schools for the entirety of my school years. Went to college, and I'm also educated to master's level, as is this guy. And so I know what he speaks of when he's talking about banter and people who greet each other by insulting each other. The way that banter works is that both parties have to be in on it. If you go up to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your intentions, doesn't know what you think about them, doesn't know what you believe, and you insult them, then it is absolutely reasonable to expect that person to be annoyed or offended by what you've said, or to give you a short shrift. Yeah, that's a great example, CD. The first scene in Shaun of the Dead, can I get any of you cunts a drink? And the thing is, I did that before Shaun of the Dead even came out. I remember when I was at college, I introduced myself to a couple of people who were like, they were a friend of a friend, and I introduced myself by saying, "What's up, cunts?" And I was on the back foot with those people from that point. It only works if you're in on it, right? Like, there are middle class people who banter with each other as well. I've met plenty of middle class people who do this shit. Like, that's got nothing to do with class. This is about interpersonal relationships and empathy. And so him doing the no true Scotsman thing with Price is a complete red herring.
That camaraderie between blokes and trying to make each other laugh has always been a massive part of lad culture. For example,
again, he talks about culture in this really strange, amorphous way. If you actually look up lad culture, here's the Wikipedia article. Lad culture, also the new laddism, was a media-driven, principally British and Irish subculture of the 1990s and the early 2000s. The term lad culture continued to be used today to refer to collective boorish or misogynist behaviour by young heterosexual men, particularly university students. Okay, so this is reference from an article from the Bristol Tab. So, just for the sake of balance, I'm pointing out the source that has been referred to here isn't necessarily a neutral one. In the lad culture of the 1990s and 2000s, the image of the lad or new lad was that of a generally middle-class figure espousing attitudes typically attributed to the working classes. Subculture involved heterosexual young men assuming an anti-intellectual position, shunning cultural pursuits and sensitivity in favour of drinking, sport, sex and sexism. So I don't think when he says lad culture, he's talking about any of that. Again, this is one of those things where he's using culture as this fluid catch-all word to just describe where he's from and the stuff he's experienced. Obviously to some extent that's how culture works, but it's really imprecise. This is not rational, logical argument that he's making by doing that. Anyone up for shunning cultural pursuits and sensitivity in favour of drinking? I'll have to after this, I tell you.
For example, when I get on the phone to my dad or my brother, usually the first thing we do is just fire off a massive volley of joke insults down the phone at each other. We're usually laughing within minutes. It's kind of about dark humour and seeing how close to the line you can get. For example, my younger brother once, when he was just a scrawny teenager, went up to the biggest, hardest bloke in our group, built like a brick shithouse. His knuckles were broken and kind of in pieces halfway down his hand from where he'd punched doors, windows and people in the past. My brother didn't even say hello. He just walked right up to him, got in his face and went, "I had your mum." And that is literally what it's like.
I had your mum is a bit different to calling someone a fucking communist or a lesbian. I had your mum generally works as banter because it is largely implausible. The vast majority of people who will do I had your mum jokes haven't had that person's mum. So that's why that works as banter. There's nothing to suggest that Noel, when he's calling Miliband and Corbyn communists, that he's doing it ironically or joking about it. The way that irony and pushing boundaries works with jokes is that you have to know what the person stands for in order to know if they're being ironic or not. Bear in mind, of course, remember, he's already gone over the few paragraphs about these Liam and Noel have said. So, the homophobic stuff, the race-related stuff, the wokeism stuff, all this kind of stuff. So he's now at the point where he's trying to say, okay, so you don't take any of that stuff seriously. This is all banter. I want to point something out as well from another video. Oasis versus In Excess. Was Noel Gallagher responsible for the death of Michael Hutchence? There's a little bit of a beef going on regarding love triangle stuff here.
When Oasis come up, he's clearly trying to make nice, he's clearly trying to communicate, we're all buds, I don't want to cause any trouble. And it seems like Liam accepts the peace offering. He can't be bothered to take it any further, he gives him a hug, and that seems to be it. According to Paolo Hewitt, however, Noel, who is definitely the less forgiving of the two brothers, had taken ecstasy that night, so he wasn't entirely with it. And so Noel, a man who doesn't tend to easily forgive and forget, was not impressed by Michael Hutchence's actions. He wasn't impressed by what Michael Hutchence had been saying in the press about Liam. And so, hyped up on ecstasy, decided to tell him exactly what he thought of him.
Has-beens shouldn't present fucking awards to gonna-bees.
So, is that banter? Do you think this is something that's not meant to be taken seriously by Michael Hutchence? Given the context that we've been given here. It's personal, right? So what the article that Mr. Guitar here is trying to debunk, he's basically trying to say that everything that Price has mentioned in the article is purely banter. For what it's worth, Liam does seem like someone who just says stupid insults at people and then will kind of back down on it and just be like, no, I was just taking the piss. To what extent he means those things, I don't know. We'll never know. But Noel, on the other hand, looking at his political perspectives and that, It reads a little differently to me. Neil Kulkarni has gone into more detail on some of the stuff that Noel said. So unfortunately, Neil doesn't give a source for these. I wasn't able to find where this came from. I'm going to assume that this quote is correct, but if it's not, please do feel free to challenge me on this. I don't want my kids coming home talking like Ali G. I'd rather they were at a school with Russian oligarchs' children. Anyone in my position, you owe it to your children to send them to a school where they don't have to walk through a metal detector in the morning. We shouldn't need riot police at schools. This is Maida Vale. This isn't Handsworth or Tottenham. Do you know what I mean? Is this banter? Again, this guy is trying to hand wave everything by saying it's banter. It is authentic working class. It's a unwritten rule that working class people like him get and no one else does. It's a secret language.
But it only worked because everyone knew the unspoken social rules that most people just summarise in a single word: banter. It's a bit of a game, and in a game like that, it is inevitable that regularly people step over the mark and go too far. When that happens, you put your hands up, you say sorry, and everyone moves on.
Or you can figure out why it went wrong, and then figure out how to not make that mistake again. You know, you can actually analyse what you said, why it rubbed the person up the wrong way, and figure out why you stepped over the line. You don't just say sorry as if that's a magic wand that brings you out of it.
The rules, Noel and Liam come from that world, and they've been playing by the rules the whole time. And on the occasions...
stock footage of two kids pushing each other back and forth to illustrate banter. Yeah, this guy's use of stock footage is interesting.
The past where they have taken the kind of the edgemanship, the brinksmanship a bit too far, usually they have put their hands up and apologised.
Usually. Notice here, even now he's having to qualify himself. Like, what about the times when they didn't?
But stuff like that is very easy to take out of context, especially if you are not a member of that culture. It's like going to see a comedian who does dark, edgy stuff and then reporting one line from their act in a newspaper with no context, with the added implication that they were dead serious when they said it and meant every word.
I'm not going to get into talking about the Jimmy Carr gypsy moth joke on this stream. Like, we've already been going on for ages. You can tell he's already got an opinion on how that played out.
Which is almost never actually the case. One of the frustrating things about UK lad culture is it does not translate very easily into almost any adjacent cultures. I lived in America for 5 years working as a musician, and that rough and tumble kind of camaraderie between blokes that exists in the UK just did not exist in the part of America where I lived. So I kind of went in there and was like a bull in a china shop at first. It just didn't translate. And by his own admission, this journalist, Simon Price...
Oh, for God's sake. Well, he got beaten up by Americans. Yeah, they destroyed him with fists and logic. Again, this is kind of a naturalistic fallacy, what he's doing here. Just because something is natural, it's therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. He's not doing anything to talk about how he adjusted. He's not talking about why his banter failed. He's not talking about what kind of banter he actually tried doing with the American people and why it misfired. He's not doing any self-analysis here whatsoever. He's just expecting you to take his word for it that this is how it works, and Simon Price has got it wrong because Simon Price is in a slightly different part of working class. Also, I know Americans, by the way. Plenty of Americans can do banter. At this point, I'm just thinking, this guy is just bad at banter, and he's been fortunate that he has been surrounded for much of his life by people who are similarly bad at banter and are therefore just as forgiving as he is. There's a great comic from webcomic name, Ha 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 Harsh. Yes, this. So, you know, this is the thing. People talk about jokes as if like they are just a joke. They're like they don't mean anything. There's nothing to them. If that's the case, why do people like certain jokes and not others? Why is it that like we all have different taste in jokes? If aspects of our personality, if aspects of what we believe don't factor into whether we enjoy jokes or not, then why do we all have such different taste in comedy? By the way, anyone who says they've never been offended by a joke, bullshit. Everyone's got some triggers when it comes to humour.
is also from an adjacent culture, albeit one here in the UK. And he too is reacting angrily to something he doesn't understand. This logical fallacy is one called begging the question, a circular argument in which the conclusion is included in the premise.
Or you could just you could just go with personal incredulity.
Oasis are bad, as you can see from their comments. And you know these comments were meant to be taken badly because, as we have already established, Oasis are bad. It's a nonsense circle. So, claim number 5. We have the implication that Oasis meant everything they ever said. It wasn't just banter. But that's false. Banter and shit-talking is just part of the culture, whether you like it or not. And if you're not part of that culture, be careful before you pass judgment.
Or what? Or what? What are you going to do? You're going to have my mum? You're going to have my mum?
Especially if you don't like it when others pass judgment on yours. But the real irony of this article is that he is claiming that Oasis are a threat to his cultural world, whilst simultaneously, brutally attacking the one that I come from. I found the article amusing, ironic, and really sad.
In the title, he's called this the most offensive article he's ever read. And earlier he said it was offensive, and now he's just whittling it down to being amusing. It's like he's trying to downplay well, I'm not the snowflake here. It's just banter. Yeah, exactly. The Price's article is just banter.
Oasis have been presented as the true voice of the council estates from the very start of their career. But what of their less stereotypical but equally working class 90s contemporaries? Don't they count? No band was more aware of class politics than Sheffield's Pulp, for example. But Pulp were arty and sang about outsiderdom and dressed like Oxfam dandies instead of Arndale-centred townies. So they're considered somehow less real than their Mancunian peers. Meanwhile, the Manic Street Preachers are as working class as they come, but refused to conform to lads clichés. They played with androgyny and homoeroticism and wore their state education on their leopard print sleeves. Pulp and the Manic Street Preachers were great, and if someone felt
they're still about.
Felt more represented by them, that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. They were both top bands with their own unique styles. So why is it so wrong that people like me felt represented by Oasis?
He's already explained that. It's because he thinks Oasis are idiots.
Who are more my style, and from...
Not just idiots, reactionary, heinous, careless idiots with statements that lean towards the right.
My world. There is no one right and wrong here. It's okay to have everyone represented, surely.
Bear in mind this was the guy who was complaining about Jay-Z being at Glastonbury, and now he's saying it's okay to have everyone represented. You can't spend one part of this video complaining that the music you like isn't being represented as well as it should be, and then in the same video have a go at someone else for complaining that the music they like isn't being represented as well as they think it should be.
But here we have the style of the Manics and Pulp being represented as somehow good, whereas Oasis and the culture they represented as somehow bad.
Yeah, he's already made
I'm
this
from
point.
that culture. I love it. I'm proud of it. And I will be till I die. The British working class are the best.
Honestly, this is like watching that film Memento. We look at all these individual scenes that should be connected, but every time they start, it's as if he's just been beamed in and he's like, okay, where am I? Like he can't remember anything about the article from before the paragraph he's focusing on.
The British working class are the best, most decent people I've ever known in my entire life, and I make no apology for that.
The best, most decent people I've ever met in my entire life. All of them. Every single member of the British working class. But not Simon Price, because he's not a member of the British working class, apparently.
And the article ends with just basically 2 paragraphs of insults. So, here we go. The Gallagher's knuckle-dragging ideas on sexuality and politics arguably shouldn't matter. We're all familiar with the concept of separating the art from the artist, although everyone's mileage varies on where to set the line in the sand. But the art needs to at least be good. Oasis, memorably described by the late great Neil Kulkarni as the English Rock Defence League, offer nothing but a sludgy, trudgy, brontosaurus-bottomed waddle, perfect for that adult nappy gait so beloved of their singer and fans.
Do you know what? Say what you will about Hargreaves, and we have laid into him quite a bit in this video, but he's got the perfect voice for reading this section of text out.
Lyrically too, they're dismal. The promisingly mischievous Elsa Alka-Seltzer rhyme of debut single Supersonic soon gave way to dull platitudes that might as well have been written by AI. But the problem is the music. Oasis don't do fast songs. Noel plays his guitar as if he's scared it will break, and Oasis's funkless, sexless plod is always carefully pitched below the velocity at which fluid dynamics dictate that you might spill your lager. Is there anything more useless than a rock band that doesn't rock? This is just, sadly, insults. There's very little here that's actually worth responding to.
Yeah, I'd cut my losses if I were you as well.
It could all be summed up very neatly with just one sentence.
If you miss open goals as much as this guy does, you might as well pack up your ball and go home early.
I don't like them, and I don't like their music.
That's the thing, yeah, they're creative insult. If you were going to write journalism where you are trashing artists, then you have to have the decency to make it funny to read.
And if you don't like someone's music, that's okay. It's not for you. And it is a little bit galling to...
Yeah, but the argument that Price is making is that culturally, people like him have been spoon-fed the idea that it is for him. So that's the reason why this article exists. From reading Price's article again, I kind of came to the conclusion that his beef is more with the media that celebrates Oasis than it actually is with Oasis themselves. And I don't really have many strong feelings about their music at all, but it's just this notion that you have to have an opinion. Like, it just reminds me of when I was at school and everyone asked me who my favourite Spice Girl was, and it was like, I don't care about the Spice Girls. Why do you keep asking me who my favourite Spice Girl is? One of the things that I've come to appreciate about modern music is that things don't get forced down your throat quite so much anymore. Like, when I was a teenager / adolescent, I hated Coldplay. A lot of my friends at college were into Coldplay. Coldplay were always on the radio, they were always being played in shops, they were always on TV. I couldn't get away from it, so I felt like I had to have an opinion on Coldplay, you know, and the opinion was I hated them. And then in the 10s, I stopped hearing about Coldplay so much, and maybe that was due to lifestyle changes, maybe music experience got a bit more splintered then with the advent of streaming services and stuff like that. And so I stopped hearing about Coldplay so much, and I stopped feeling anywhere near as unkind towards them. There's a reason why music gets used as torture, you know. There's a story recently about like a British prisoner who was tortured in Russia by playing ABBA 24 hours a day.
Read all this from someone who just a few paragraphs earlier suggested Noel Gallagher was a bad person for disliking Jay-Z.
Yeah, but again, like, he explained why he thought Noel Gallagher was a bad person. Okay, again,
there is no music that has ever been made that everybody likes. Music tastes are incredibly personal and subjective. If you hate Oasis, that's fine. It's not for you. But the millions of decent, kind, ordinary people who love it do like it. It makes...
Decent, kind. We have a source for this claim, please, that all these millions of people are decent and kind?
them happy. So what's wrong with that? Simon Price, I wish that somewhere in amongst all of this hateful stuff you could find the heart to at least be happy that Oasis brings so many of the rest of us joy. I've got no beef with you loving the Manics and Pulp. I think they're great as well. So why can't you be happy for me loving Oasis and feeling represented by them?
He's explained it and you have not debunked it.
Is your culture good and mine is bad? So, as you can see, we've had the point the journalist set out to prove, and unfortunately he used logical fallacies as evidence to support that point.
And as we've seen, Hargreaves has used many logical fallacies of his own, significantly more than Price. And that's the reason why I'm responding to this whole thing, to be honest, because this kind of shit gets on my nerves. Logical fallacies are an important tool when it comes to understanding rhetoric, for sure. They're not something you just throw around in order to try and prove that your music taste is better than someone else's. He has not proven a single one of these things wrong. The ones where he has, he's done that by misrepresenting the argument.
In my opinion, almost every point in the whole article can just be written off as wrong. Yes, it is presented as an opinion piece, but it doesn't just attack Oasis, it also says this about Oasis fans. We are nostalgic for simple times. Any who don't...
Okay, nothing wrong with that. You earlier said that he meant you were simpletons, so...
like woke culture are wankers. He calls Oasis fans...
Again, woke culture. Didn't clarify what he meant by that.
Flag-shaggers and Reform voters.
He didn't say that was all Oasis fans.
He calls us apologists for caveman-like ideas on sexuality and politics. And
He did explain why, and you wrote it off as all banter. So that is kind of an apologist rhetoric that you're doing there.
says that we apparently walk with an adult nappy gait, implying that we are also overgrown babies.
Okay, to be fair, Price did go too far on that one.
Simon Price, you are a fellow humanist, so we have that in common. And I want you to know that this article felt pretty much like nothing more than a torrent of hate directed at me and people like me. It wasn't fair, and we did not deserve it. In the past, there's no doubt that the Gallaghers have said some things that were way over the line. But haven't we all made mistakes?
No, not me, never. Should all mistakes be treated equally? I always hate that we've all made mistakes things, because, you know, it depends on the mistake. It depends on how you handle the mistake as well.
And both Noel and Liam, when they stepped over the line publicly, have, several times, put their hands up and apologised. In my opinion, this article was way over the line and a real personal attack on people like me. So, I wonder who's the bigger man here. Simon Price? Will you dig your heels in and entrench? Or will you apologise as well? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon.
Spoiler alert, the bigger man is me, because I think they're both idiots. God almighty. You ever heard of Brandolini's Law? In all seriousness, if you're an Oasis fan, I don't have any beef with you, alright? Some of my best friends are Oasis fans. Well, not best friends. But if you are an Oasis fan and you think this video was well researched and well argued, then you are probably one of the people that Simon Price is talking about. Because this is a terrible representation of Oasis fans, this video. Like, you can dismantle Price's article in a far less dishonest manner than what this guy has done here. And I don't even like the original article. By the way, there's a fuck ton of logical fallacies in the comments here. So, you know, I'm sure Hargreaves here will go through them all individually and point out why they are fallacies. So, James Hargreaves Guitar, if you've watched through this video, and I don't blame you if you haven't, it's quite a long one, but what are you doing? I get that the Simon Price article annoyed you, and as an Oasis fan channel, I'm sure you felt it was important to respond to it promptly, but this was not the way to do it. It's good that you have an interest in logical fallacies, but if you're going to try and point them out in other people's work, at least make an effort to not use them yourself. Also, gotta say, after watching a few videos from your channel, the YouTube algorithm decided to recommend me another pro-Oasis article that had comments like these underneath it. So even if you've only met predominantly left-leaning Oasis fans, and for the record I don't doubt that there's a significant number of them out there, the kind of fans that Price mentioned do exist, and I don't think it's good practice to hand-wave their existence in the way that your video does. Anyway, I know that Price blocked you on Twitter, and I'm not going to do that. So if you want to chat about anything that came up in this video, then hit me up. Thanks for watching, this video is over.
When I've slagged off Oasis or the Roses or any of those bands, I've had it back. Oh, you must hate the working classes, as if this is all the working classes can do. Exactly.